History remembers great people for what they accomplished: discoveries, empires, revolutions, and other such nonsense. What it doesn't always remember is how strangely some of them met their end. In this series, we will look at influential figures whose lives shaped history and whose deaths were, for one reason or another, unusual or unexpected. These aren't legends or myths. They're well-documented historical accounts, told with a little context, a little irony, and the understanding that history is often stranger than fiction. Today, we'll look at historic figures whose stories remind us that no matter how powerful, brilliant, or influential someone becomes, the ending is rarely dignified. This handsome prick is Tycho Brahe, one of the most important astronomers in human history, and proof that even geniuses can be defeated by something as simple as social etiquette. Tycho was born in 1546 into Danish nobility, which meant three things. He was wealthy, he was educated, and he had very strong opinions. From a young age, Tycho became obsessed with the stars. Yeah, well, I was pretty obsessed with actress Kelly LeBrock in the 80s until she married Steven Seagal, so I guess big whoop.
So, what would you little maniacs like to do first?
Oh, those stars, the bright and burny ones. Tycho became obsessed with the stars, but not in a poetic, wow, look how pretty way. More of a, I will measure the universe myself way. And measure it, he did. Before telescopes even existed, Tycho Brahe produced the most precise astronomical observations ever recorded. His data was so accurate that scientists were still using it decades later. In fact, his measurements directly enabled Johannes Kepler to figure out that planets move in elliptical orbits. So, if you like modern astronomy, orbital mechanics, or knowing where planets actually are, you can thank Tycho. Tycho was not just brilliant, he was also rather eccentric. He lost part of his nose in a duel over a math argument and replaced it with a metal prosthetic. He kept a pet moose, which allegedly died after falling down a set of stairs at a party. If you had a pet moose, wouldn't you take it to parties too? He believed astrology was legitimate. It's not. And he'd cast horoscopes for members of royalty. He also built a massive, state-of-the-art observatory funded by the King of Denmark, basically the world's first big science lab. In short, Tycho was respected, wealthy, and hugely influential, all of which made him deeply committed to social rules. This will matter later. In 1601, Tycho attended a formal banquet in Prague. Now, according to etiquette at the time, it was considered extremely rude to leave the table before the host dismissed the guests. Even if you were uncomfortable. Even if you really, really needed to step away. Tycho, being a nobleman, took etiquette seriously. Very seriously. As the evening went on, Tycho found himself in a situation that can only be described as medically inconvenient. But he stayed seated. He made polite conversation. He waited. As he waited, his at-capacity bladder strained in agony. He was a 55-year-old man with a full bladder. As any middle-aged man or woman who has given birth will tell you, a full bladder is not something one toys with or ignores. He waited some more. Eventually, the dinner ended. Tycho went home, and shortly after, he became seriously ill. Over the next several days, Tycho's condition worsened. He reportedly said, "Let me not seem to have lived in vain," which is an extremely dramatic thing to say, given the circumstances. Despite medical care, Tycho Brahe died 11 days after the banquet. The leading historical explanation is simple and painfully ironic. One of the greatest scientific minds of all time, a man who mapped the heavens, helped unlock the laws of planetary motion, was undone by not excusing himself from the table to piss on the nearest available peasant's leg. After Tycho's death, his assistant Johannes Kepler inherited his data. Kepler used it to derive the laws of planetary motion, which later helped Newton formulate gravity. So, in a strange way, Tycho's life ended, but his work launched modern astronomy forward. Still, historians can't help but notice the lesson. You can challenge the universe. You can defy kings. You can wear a metal nose and keep a moose as a goddamn pet. But social pressure at a formal banquet? That's where the universe finally wins. Adolf Frederick was King of Sweden in the mid-18th century, reigning during a period when political power belonged largely to Parliament rather than the Crown. Remembered as a mild-mannered and largely ceremonial monarch, he is often described by historians as well-intentioned, personally agreeable, and politically sidelined. If I was a member of royalty with no real responsibilities or power, I'd likely be rather laid back too.
It's good to be the king.
During his reign, Sweden was governed under the so-called Age of Liberty, a system that sharply limited royal authority. Adolf Frederick signed laws, attended court functions, and fulfilled the dignified routines of kingship, but major decisions were made elsewhere. In many ways, he's remembered less for his decisive leadership and more for quietly occupying the throne while others ran the state. Which makes what happened next unusually memorable. On Shrove Tuesday in 1771, the king did what many Europeans traditionally did on that day. He indulged.
It's good to be the king.
Adolf Frederick had previously suffered from poor health, including digestive issues, migraines, and, according to historical notes, a generally weak constitution. Nonetheless, he sat down to a prodigious meal consisting of lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, champagne, and finally, a generous helping of semla, sweetbread rolls soaked in warm milk and filled with almond paste. According to contemporary accounts, the king enjoyed not one, but multiple servings of dessert, consumed enthusiastically and without restraint.
It's good to be the king.
Later that evening, having fully honored both tradition and appetite, at the age of 60, Adolf Frederick became unwell and died shortly thereafter. There was no assassination, no battlefield drama, and no palace intrigue. The official cause was simply eating too much. Okay, so the actual cause of death is believed to be a stroke, but the stroke was very likely induced by the stress this dummy put on his body by overindulging at the dinner. In death, Adolf Frederick achieved a distinction that had largely eluded him in life: historical notoriety. While his reign is often summarized as uneventful, his final meal ensured his place in history as one of the few monarchs remembered less for how they ruled and more for how thoroughly they dined. Aeschylus lived in the 5th century BCE and is remembered as one of the foundational figures of Western drama, often called the father of Greek tragedy. So, by extension, you can blame the Scorsese wannabe for drivel like Keeping Up with the Kardashians and Jersey Shore. During his lifetime, Aeschylus transformed theater from simple choral performance into complex drama, introducing additional actors, dialogue-driven plots, and themes of justice, fate, and divine law. His surviving plays, including Agamemnon and the Orestia, helped define tragedy as a serious art form capable of exploring moral responsibility and human suffering. In Athens, he was celebrated not only as a playwright, but also as a veteran of the Persian Wars, having fought at Marathon and Salamis. By the standards of his time, he lived a full and distinguished life, which makes what happened next somewhat difficult to ignore. Later in life, Aeschylus relocated to the Greek colony of Gela in Sicily, possibly seeking patronage or simply to distance himself from Athenian politics. Or maybe he had a hankering for a tasty gyro. We simply don't know. According to ancient sources, he had been warned by prophecy that his death would come from something falling upon him from above. taken this seriously, he is said to have spent time outdoors, avoiding buildings and enclosed spaces where such a fate might occur. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. While seated outside, an eagle flying overhead reportedly mistook Aeschylus's bald head for a rock. Carrying a tortoise and searching for a hard surface to crack its shell, the bird released its cargo directly onto the playwright. The prophecy was fulfilled, if not in the way anyone expected. Aeschylus's works continued to be performed long after his death, studied by philosophers, dramatists, and students for centuries to come. His legacy shaped theater itself, even as his ending became a reminder that foresight is not the same as control. In the end, the man who gave tragedy its structure became part of one himself, brief, ironic, and entirely beyond rehearsal.